People get anxious and they say, oh, because maybe this person isn't going to like me, or maybe I'm going to lose my job. But it's really about how we're treating ourselves that we're wanting to find out about. And so if you're really curious and you're really asking that, we have a soul that is part of our, what we call the inner child is our soul. Part of our soul is in the body. The rest of our soul is all around us. And that soul, that inner child, communicates very often through feelings and also words. So if I say, what am I telling you that's making you anxious? And I really go in and listen, that inner child, that soul might say to me, you're putting all this pressure on me. You're telling me I have to be perfect. You're telling me I can't make a mistake.
If you haven't done so already, go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. It's a little red button. You punch that, and it's going to notify you every time we put out a new episode that can help you improve your bone health. And then also, if you haven't done so already, head over to BoneCoach.com, sign up for the free 7-day osteoporosis kickstart. That's going to walk you through everything you need to be doing right now to get on the path to improvement and stronger bones. After you do those two things, go ahead and press play on this episode, and I'll see you inside. Welcome to this episode of the BoneCoach Show. Joining us today to explore how to love yourself for better life, relationships, and health is Dr. Margaret Paul. Dr. Margaret Paul is a best-selling author of 12 published books, a relationship expert, and co-creator of the powerful inner bonding self-healing process. She's appeared on numerous radio and television shows, including Oprah, and has successfully worked with hundreds of thousands and taught classes and seminars around the world for over 50 years. Margaret is also a member of the Transformational Leadership Council. Dr. Margaret, it is great to have you here. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm looking forward to this too. So tell us about your story. How did you become the best-selling author of all these different books, a relationship expert, and the co-creator of this beautiful, amazing, powerful process called inner bonding self-healing process?
Well, like so many people, I came from a dysfunctional family, and my mother decided that the problems were mine. At 5, she took me to a psychiatrist who was awful, and I decided at 5 that I could do a better job than him, and that's when I decided to do this work at 5, and I never actually wavered from that, and I became a traditional psychotherapist, and I practiced that for 17 years, but I didn't like the results. I had a ton of my own therapy and worked with my clients. I didn't like the results. I started to pray for a process that would really work fast and deep and that people could learn. They could do it themselves. They didn't have to be dependent all the time on a therapist. And that's when I met the co-creator of Inner Bonding, Dr. Erica Chopich. Of course, we had to meet. She had half the process. I had half the process. Spirit came in and put it together. That was 38 years ago. And it's been evolving, and it continues to evolve, and I continue to write as it evolves, and it's completely changed my life and the life of so many hundreds of thousands of people.
That is amazing, and then so many people have benefited from. What is inner bonding? Could we talk through that?
Yeah, so inner bonding is a 6-step emotional, spiritual, it's mind, body, spirit process. And it's a process that helps people to start to understand what their feelings mean, what their feelings are telling them, instead of ignoring them. It's the opposite of what we call self-abandonment. It's learning to really love yourself, see yourself, value who you are. It teaches people how to connect with a higher source of guidance, whatever that is for them, an inner wise self or a higher self or spiritual teacher or whatever, but something that's higher than their limited ego mind, so that we can access information about what's loving to us, because there are very few role models, like maybe the Dalai Lama, or very few role models of people who are truly loving. So anybody can learn this 6-step process, and it's truly life-changing.
And what all are the steps, if we could walk through each of those pieces there?
Yeah, okay. So step 1 is the willingness to learn to go from your head. Most of us learned as we were kids to get up in our head because we didn't know how to handle pain. Like if we had loss or there was abuse or we felt lonely, we didn't know how to handle that pain. So one way we learned was to go up in our head. But when you're in your head, you're not in your body and you can't feel your feelings. So step 1 is learning to go make the big journey from your head into your body. and start to pay attention to your feelings. Like if you want to be a good parent, you pay attention to a baby crying. You don't put them in bed and go out to lunch. You want to hear what's going on so you can do something about it. And in inner bonding, people learn that their feelings have a tremendous amount of information for them. It lets us know whether we're loving ourselves or abandoning ourselves. It lets us know what's happening with other people, whether they're safe, whether they're dangerous. It helps us understand maybe sometimes ahead of time something we need to avoid. Our feelings are really powerful. Unfortunately, many people have learned to ignore them. And staying up in your head is one form of self-abandonment. Judging yourself is a form. Turning to various addictions and numbing out is a form. Making other people responsible for your feelings instead of learning to take care of them is another form of self-abandonment. So step one, you get in your body and you want responsibility for your feelings. Step two is you breathe into your heart. And in inner bonding, there's only two intentions. One is to learn about what's loving to you and sharing your love with others. And the other is to protect against pain with various forms of controlling behavior, to get love, avoid pain, feel safe with various forms of control, which is where most of us, I mean, I learned to do that. Most people learn, okay, how can I control getting love and avoiding pain and feeling safe? And that's what our ego wounded self that's located in our lower left brain has learned to do. But in step two, we shift into opening to learning, being curious, and we learn to bring in the love and the compassion and the strength and the wisdom of a higher source, whatever that is for a person. Then in step three, we go back into the feelings, and now we're asking. Like, let's say you go in and you feel anxious, and you're asking, what am I telling you? How am I treating you? What am I doing or not doing? See, it's about me. It's not about something external. People get anxious and they say, oh, because maybe this person isn't going to like me, or maybe I'm going to lose my job. But it's really about how we're treating ourselves that we're wanting to find out about. And so if you're really curious and you're really asking that, we have a soul that is part of our, what we call the inner child is our soul. Part of our soul is in the body. The rest of our soul is all around us. And that soul, that inner child, communicates very often through feelings and also words. So if I say, what am I telling you that's making you anxious? And I really go in and listen, that inner child, that soul might say to me, you're putting all this pressure on me. You're telling me I have to be perfect. You're telling me I can't make a mistake. You're telling me if I do everything right, then I can have control over this person or that person liking me. You're telling me I'm not good enough. I mean, there's all sorts of things we tell ourselves that are programmed into this lower left brain. And those are our false beliefs. And once we understand how we're treating ourselves and causing these feelings, we go a little deeper into that ego wounded part. And we say, why are you putting on all this pressure? Why are you telling this inner child he or she has to be perfect? And that wounded self might say, oh, well, because this person has to like you for you to be okay. That's a big false belief. You see, that our worth is determined by how other people feel about us. Or if you're perfect, then you can have control over how people feel about you. That's a big false belief. So there's hundreds of false beliefs, and this is a process for discovering them. Then there's also feelings of life, like loneliness and grief and helplessness over other people and heartbreak, that we also need to learn to manage, because these are the feelings that we learn to avoid with all the ways we abandon ourselves. So once we understand how we're treating ourselves, we go to step 4, which is, again, we connect with our higher self. And we're asking 2 questions. What is the truth about any of these false beliefs? And what is loving to me? Now, even if people don't believe there's anything there, they start to ask the questions, they're going to start to get answers. I've worked with people who are atheists, don't believe anything's there. I say, just ask. Just ask, is this true? Just ask, is this loving? What would be loving to me? And they get answers. Then in step 5, we take the loving action. whatever it is we're guided to take. And it could be any of hundreds of things. Stopping eating sugar, stop smoking, eat better, start exercising, go back to school, speak up to somebody. There's so many different loving actions that we might need to take. It's not always easy, of course. But once we take a loving action, we go to step 6, which is tuning back into our feelings. And if we've taken a loving action, we're going to feel some relief. We're going to feel a deeper sense of self-worth. We're also going to feel energized. That's very briefly the 6 steps of inner bonding.
That's beautiful. And I know, oftentimes when we're talking about maybe somebody that's got a health condition or somebody with osteopenia or osteoporosis, and, they've been in a situation where they may feel like, I wish I could have done something else. I wish I could have done something better. If only I knew this, I would have done this. And they go down this path of blaming themselves because their hindsight wasn't as good as they wished it was. When someone is in that position, what would you say to them before they head down that path?
Well, that kind of thinking, where we're focused on the past, is always coming from this ego-wounded self. The ego-wounded self loves to focus on the past or the future, not be present. But in order to really take care of ourselves, we have to be present. So when we're going, oh, I wish I had this, or if only I had done this. I mean, first of all, we've all done the best we could. If we would have known to do it better, we would have, right? And so, I mean, I look back, one of the things that got me into really focusing on health was that I was a sickly kid. And in my early 20s, I was really tired of being sick. And I started reading books on health. And boy, that changed everything for me. So that's a big area of loving yourself. But I can certainly look back. I can look back on how I parented my kids. I can look back on what I was eating at different times. I can look back on, various kinds of exercise. What's the point? You see, that is a way to avoid the present and avoid responsibility for what you're doing right now, because that's the only thing we have control over, is what we're doing right now. So when we get into, oh, if only I had, or I was such a jerk, or how come I didn't know that, we're kind of getting ourselves off the hook from taking responsibility right now.
Wow. And that's really empowering also,
right.
because that helps the individual understand that there's a lot they can do right now in the moment to address those things. What are some of the indicators that there's room for more self-love? Like, how will the person experience this, and how will maybe the external world experience this person also?
Well, see, from my point of view, it's an ongoing process. We always need to be in the process of learning to love ourselves. My experience is that when I learn to love myself in a particular situation, new situations come up, whether it's physically or emotionally or spiritually or in a relationship or in a work situation or with organization or whatever it is. These are all big areas of life. So we're going to experience feelings like anxiety and depression and guilt and shame and emptiness and aloneness and jealousy. These feelings are letting us know that we're not loving ourselves. And so whenever people feel these feelings, instead of avoiding them, like by grazing in front of the refrigerator or grabbing the drink, go in and do inner bonding and see how you're abandoning yourself and what you need to do to start loving yourself. But it's not like there's an end to this. It's like there's never an end to being a parent. I've got 3 kids. I will always be their parent. It's not going to end until I die. And maybe even then I can parent from spirit or whatever, but it's the same thing on the inner level. It doesn't end. And so I think everybody is always needing to learn more about what's loving to themselves. But when we're really in joy, when we're in peace, when we feel filled up inside, when we feel like we have love to share, when our relationships are going well, when we're not trying to get approval, pulling on others for approval, or scared of disapproval, or trying to get love rather than be loving, those are all indications that we need work. We're abandoning ourselves when those things are happening. If we're always late, for example, then there's disorganization going on in your life. If you feel so alone all the time, it means you're leaving that inner child alone inside. And if you don't have friends, it means that you might be pulling on people for their approval and trying to have control over it. And nobody likes that. Everybody wants control, but nobody wants to be controlled. And so other people might be seeing you as depressed or as angry or as withdrawn. I mean, certainly these things go on in relationships a lot, where like one person's angry and the other's withdrawn, or one person is a people pleaser, but they're getting headaches because they're putting all this pressure on themselves to be perfect for the other person. So we can often see in somebody else what we can't see in ourselves. We can see that this person is in some way not loving themselves. It's so much harder to see in ourselves, but that's where being tuned into our feelings come from. Your feelings are unerring. They will let you know when you're feeling, like I said, full of peace and joy, you're loving yourself. When you're not feeling that, I tell people anytime they're feeling anything less than peace and fullness inside, it's time to do an inner bonding process.
And do you see people that maybe they lean in more to their work, or they pick up they drink a little bit more, or they start smoking or trying to cope or compensate in different areas when they haven't actually addressed and done the internal work? They're maybe looking for an external mechanism to address something that really needs an internal intervention.
Yeah, well, of course, this happens all the time because most people have never learned, like I said, never learned to learn from their feelings, nor have they learned how to compassionately manage the painful feelings of life. Like, let's say somebody's in a relationship and their partner breaks up with them, and they're feeling heartbroken, and they're feeling lonely, and they're feeling helpless over the situation. These are core painful feelings of life. They're feeling grief over the loss, but they don't know how to manage these. They don't know how to just be with them and bring compassion into them, and recognize that they're normal feelings of life, and to really open to them and allow them to be there and allow them to move through, which they will do when we attend to them. Instead, they believe from that ego wounded self, I can't handle this. So they'll drink more, or they'll overeat, or eat junk, eat sugar. They'll, stop by and pick up the donuts. They'll watch too much TV. They'll overwork. They'll turn to pornography. There's so many things. There's so many ways that people are addicted. They'll get addicted to video games, or to the internet, or to social media. There's our society offers so many ways of avoiding our painful feelings. And the problem is that they're all self-abandoning. And so, like, let's say you have an actual child who's hurting. Let's say their best friend left and went to another state, and they're missing their best friend, and they're hurting. And instead of attending to the child and holding them and comforting them and being there, you just go grab a drink and tell them to watch TV, or here's a cookie, or, that just doesn't help. In fact, it makes it worse. And this is what people are doing a lot. And then, of course, it's going to affect their health, which is what you talk about a lot, affects their health when they're not taking care of themselves on the physical, emotional, spiritual levels.
Is there a way to internally, like when we start to approach, self-love, is there a way to internally be thinking about this where it's not just, maybe we're not moving away from pain, but we're moving toward purpose and love?
Oh, absolutely. We don't have to be in pain. See, to me, I believe that the reason we're on the planet is to evolve in our ability to love. It has to start with ourselves and extend out to others, and then share that love in our passion and our sense of purpose in life. So when people, lots of times when people start to practice inner bonding, that's when they get in touch with their passionate purpose. They may not have known it before, because that blueprint for what we came here to do is actually in our soul, in that inner child. But that soul might not tell you what it is until he or she trusts that you're going to listen, that you're going to be there, you're going to take action, you're going to do something about it. So we don't have to be in pain, but we have to really be devoted to wanting to be a loving human being. And it has to start with ourselves. And to me, this has a really broader application, because not only for our health and well-being, but for our whole planet. I mean, if people were really seeing and valuing and loving themselves, when you get to see your own beautiful soul through the eyes of your higher guidance, because we can't see it through our ego wounded self, but when you see that you are an expression of divine love with your special gifts, then you start to see who everybody else is. You start to feel a oneness with everybody else's soul, because on some level we are one, but it becomes very easy to see who people are. And when you can do that, you can't hurt them. You see, if people were really learning to see and value themselves, there would be no racism, there would be no sexism, homophobia, misogyny. It wouldn't exist, because people can't hurt each other when they're loving themselves, and they can't hurt the planet. I mean, our planet would be so different if there wasn't all the greed. And I mean, you know, with bringing about health, the kinds of foods we need to eat to have strong bones, which I've been looking into, since I was in my early 20s. And I mean, I know what happens to people when they eat factory farm foods, or when they eat, processed foods and junk foods and all that. I mean, of course, they're going to fall apart in one way or another. And so, but, all that is coming from the greed of people who are putting that stuff out to make money and not caring about the effect that it has. And so to me, there's a broader issue here, that if people learn to love themselves, it will change everything.
Just to share something personally here too, even when I started down my own health path and my own health journey, and I took on meditation. And for me, as somebody who was in the Marine Corps, I was very wanting to control things, all the time. And I couldn't get out of my own head to the point where I could just sit there still with my own thoughts and address some of the things that maybe are from my past, or some of the things that I needed to address now. And when it took me about a year to get into the process of just sitting with those thoughts and getting comfortable and actually making progress. And now meditation itself is just like a daily practice for me. And it's so, so important. And I know it has so many good benefits for our health. And I love what you're sharing here too, is part of this whole process in healing and becoming our best selves is learning to love ourselves. And I think what's really important is that we're always a student, always a lifelong learner of not just the external things like what's in the books, but also inside ourselves, and exploring that and figuring out who you are and all those things.
Yeah, it's such a difference. I was brought up in a family where there was no way for them to see who I was. And so what happens, and that's true of most families, they project their own lack of self-worth onto the child. And so I grew up thinking, I'm not good enough, I'm bad, what's wrong with me, all that kind of thing, like so many people grow up with. When I learned inner bonding, when Spirit actually put it all together and I started practicing it, that's when I started to see who I am. And that's what I hope for people, because when you know who you are truly, you're not your wounded self, you're not your ego wounded self, you're this beautiful soul. Then you get motivated to take care of yourself. You get motivated to create a healthy body for your soul to live in. I used to be, when I was younger, I was really addicted to sugar and all that stuff. And, it's hard to get off of. And I really wanted to be healthy, but it was hard to get off of. But once I started to practice inner bonding, it became very, very easy to eat really well, because I wanted a healthy body for my soul to live in. Just like if somebody loves a child, they want the child to be healthy. And so it's so important on so many levels. And I've been on this journey for a long time. I like to share my age with people because some people get inspired that I am 83 and I have strong bones.
Love it.
And I have great health and lots of energy. In fact, I can often run circles around young people because usually they're not eating well. And so, it's so important to really get who you are, so that you want to take care of this house of your soul. You want to take care of this body. I'm planning on having this body for a long time. I think I'll be around for at least another 20 years. And I just want to be healthy the whole time. I don't want to get decrepit. I don't want to break bones. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want any of these diseases. It's so interesting in that I have a group of people that I was friends with in the 7th grade. We were really tight friends. And during COVID, we reconnected, 7 of us. So we're all the same age, but they're getting knee replacements and hip replacements and I don't have any of that, because I'm the only one who's been eating really well. And by really well, I mean really well. I eat all organic. I don't eat processed food. I don't eat sugar. I don't eat high fructose corn syrup. I don't eat anything with any pesticides. I don't eat factory farm foods. I eat for my microbiome. I eat really well. And I have for 62 years, I think.
That's great. And that's such an important part of this too. It's, I mean, your diet, your nutrition, it's not just going to feed into your body. It's also going to feed into your thoughts, your mind, how you feel, all these different things. So what you put into your body is going to become you in some form. You just have to remember that.
Yeah, and that's right. And so much of the research in the last 10, 15 years has shown that our microbiome, our gut bacteria, affect so much of our brain.
Mm-hmm.
And how you feel. So when I work with people, for example, with anxiety and depression, I always find out how they're eating, because anxiety and depression can come from toxins that are coming from the gut into the brain. And just like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or ADHD or all of those, autism can come from an imbalance in the gut. And so when I work with somebody, it's not just on the emotional level or spiritual level, it's also got to be on the physical level. And it's hard to want to take care of yourself if you're feeling bad, if you're feeling anxious and depressed most of the time because you're eating badly and because there's toxins in your brain. Where are you going to get the motivation to exercise every day, which is so important, to eat well every day? So it's all tied in to learning to love yourself.
I couldn't agree more. Margaret, this has been amazing. What I would love to understand, any other actionable tips or things like that you think are important for our audience to understand?
Well, the most important thing is for them to learn to stay tuned in, because if you don't know that you're feeling something, then you're not going to be able to take care of it. But one of the things that I encourage people to start to get in the habit of doing is to ask throughout the day, and I ask for everything, what's loving right now? What's in my highest good right now? Just asking that question throughout the day, it becomes a habit when you do it often enough, because our brain has neuroplasticity. So when you're saying, what's loving to me now, you'll start to get ideas and you'll start to take that action, even if you're not going through the whole process. I mean, I do it with everything I put in my mouth. I do it with how I spend my time. I do it with everything. What's loving to me right now? And you'll be amazed. People will be amazed at what happens when they do that. Now, there's one other thing that I want to comment on, and that is one's ability to connect with that higher self. This took me quite a while to connect the dots of what it takes, but I'd like to share with people what it takes.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so spirit exists at a higher frequency than we operate at. Like if we operated like a hummingbird's wings, we wouldn't see each other. And so we have to be denser. Spirit operates at a higher frequency. Most people can't see them. Some people can, but people can learn to raise their frequency high enough to hear that their voices. Now, it takes two things to raise the frequency. And this did take me quite a while to understand. So for a long time, I wanted to have what I call at-will divine connection. That is to be able to connect to it anytime I wanted, not just when it happened here or there or when I meditated, but anytime, not to have to sit and meditate to connect. And when inner bonding came in, I started to be able to connect. And I realized that one of the reasons, and there are two major reasons, but one of them I realized, which was that I had to be open to learning. Remember inner bonding, the intention to learn to love yourself. It's very specific. So I realized that when I consciously chose the intention to learn with my higher guidance about what was loving to me, I started to connect. And I thought, oh, wow, that's the secret. But then I started working with my clients. I thought, oh, if they just move into an intention to learn, they'll connect. But they didn't. They didn't have the same experience I had. And it took me a while to realize that it's also the frequency of the body. I had been eating well for so long that the frequency of my body was also high. And so the combination of eating well and being open to learning about loving yourself made it very easy for me to connect. But when you've been eating the junk food and the processed food and the factory farm food, that's really hard on the body. And the body has to work very hard to deal with it. And the body isn't actually getting the building blocks it needs for health, for healthy bones and healthy cells and all of that. It's not getting it from that food. So the frequency is generally too low, even if people open to learning. It's too low to have that at will. They may be able to do it here or there, but living in at will connection is amazing. It's just amazing. And I wouldn't live any other way at this point. So when I work with people, I say, part of loving yourself, if you really want to have that spiritual connection and know that you're never alone and know that you're always guided, know that you're always comforted, know that you're always going to have an access of truth, that you always will have access to truth, you not only have to practice being open to learning, but you've got to be eating well. And of course, that's very challenging for a lot of people, as you know.
So important. Well, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Margaret Paul. And I would love for you to share, where can people find you if they want to learn more, because we'll leave those resources in the show notes.
Well, people can go to innerbonding.com.
Okay.
And we have a free 7-day course. And of course, I have many books on inner bonding, and I have many courses. I have a course called Love Yourself that is really life-changing for people. And we have a membership, Inner Bonding Village. And I also, every other week, I do an online called Inner Bonding Community, where I bring people through an inner bonding process, and I talk on a topic, and then I do laser sessions with people so that they can actually see inner bonding at work. And anybody is welcome to join that community. It's not real expensive. And that's a great way to be learning and getting support for your inner bonding process. But the website is very big. It has thousands of articles on it and many, many videos, many ways of learning inner bonding.
Well, we're going to leave all the resources, show notes, everything. We're going to leave innerbonding.com and all that over at bonecoach.com/Dr. Margaret Paul Inner Bonding. Dr. Margaret, thank you again so much for your time. And for everyone listening, we'll see you in the next episode. Hey, it's Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. Hope you found that episode helpful and that you enjoyed it. Just one last reminder, if you haven't done so already, head over to bonecoach.com, sign up for your free 7-day osteoporosis kickstart. It's going to tell you everything you need to do to start getting on the path to improvement. Hope you found this helpful. I'm your Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. I'll see you soon.